Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome, welcome, welcome. It is 4 p.m. ET on Tuesday, and you have found us here at Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze, and we are so pleased that you are here today. I'm your host, Hank Phillippi Ryan, the USA Today bestselling author of 13, going on 14 novels of suspense. My current book is Her Perfect Life, which you see so casually displayed behind me. My new book coming out is called The House Guest, and it comes out in February of 2023, and you'll hear much more about that when the time comes. If you have never been to Crime Time before, this is the day that you want to be here. I am so glad to see you all here today. I see Shannon Hansen and Pamela Fry-Priest, and Diane is here, and Sherry, and that's great because hey Janine, you know who we have today. The incredible, fabulous, wonderful B.A. Paris, whose books I absolutely adore. And this one, her brand new one, launch day today, The Prisoner, is no different. It is so good, you all. And I cannot wait for you to read it and to hear from B.A. everything about this book, which is going to be impossible because everything is a spoiler. So I'll let her tell you a little bit about that. Booklist has already named it a Hall of Fame novel already, and says that The Prisoner is a harrowing Cinderella thriller. We should talk about that. Featuring an underestimated heroine in ruthless survivor Annalee, whose sharp-edged narrative keeps the suspense churning and offers a counterweight to the malignant. And I'm just not even going to read you the rest of that review because I think it gives away a little bit too much. So welcome, welcome, welcome to B.A. Paris. Happy launch day to you. And you are coming to us, well, it's 4 o'clock here in Boston. Where are you and what time is it? And what are you doing today?
Okay, well, thank you for that wonderful introduction, Hank. Thank you. I'm actually in London. It's 4 hours later than for you. It's 7:45 here in the evening. And I'm actually in my daughter's flat in London because where we live in the countryside, we have terrible connections. And every time I do an interview, I tend to drop out. Oh. And as this is live, I thought I can't risk that. So I'm squatting her flat, and she's just moved in, which is why it's quite bare behind me, nothing on the bookshelves. So I just thought I'd explain that, why an author has empty bookshelves behind her. But yes, so I'm in London at the moment.
And what are you doing for lunch day? Look at everybody coming here. Sherry and Darlene saying, excited for this novel. Brenda saying, what does BA stand for? We'll talk about that in a minute. Darlene is saying, happy pub day. So many questions, so many people. This book looks fantastic, says Shannon Hansen. Are you doing anything special for pub day?
Well, earlier today, I went out and had a glass of champagne with my husband, which was really nice. So, but then I have a second pub day on Thursday for the UK. So it's quite a week for publications. So yes, but it was lovely today. I did a few things, got some flowers, which was lovely.
Oh, that's so nice. It is such a cause for celebration when there's a new B.A. Paris book. And if you have just joined us, we are talking about the brand new The Prisoner by B.A. Paris. Even this cover is absolutely perfect. And we can talk about that in a minute. I want to welcome you all because here's Brenda Gaskell, and look at all the comments coming in. Sue Johnson Bishop and Catch a Clue. That's so funny. And Sherry Brown. If you are new to A Mighty Blaze, if you are new to Crime Time, Mighty Blaze was started at the beginning of the pandemic. Oh, golly, 2.5 years ago by the incredible powerhouse team of Jenna Blum and Caroline Levitt to keep us all talking about books, to keep us discussing new books and discovering new books and talking to our favorite authors and maybe discovering some new favorite authors. And if you do not know B.A. Paris, I don't know if that's possible, but if you don't, she will soon be one of your favorite authors as well. Let me tell you a little bit about B.A. Paris. She's the New York Times and internationally best-selling author of Behind Closed Doors, which was a knockout breakout novel. The Breakdown, Bring Me Back, The Dilemma, and The Therapist. Having lived in France for many years, she and her husband now live in the UK. She has worked both in finance and as a teacher, and she has 5 daughters. So welcome, welcome, welcome to Crime Time. And the guests are pouring in. Here is Deborah and Patty. Thank you. That is amazing. One of the things that happens when authors try to discuss their novels is that some interviewer says, "What's your book about?" And I am flummoxed when that happens because I never know exactly what to say. Do you have a problem with that? Do you have trouble with that?
I think it is quite hard because you never know how much to give away. You're very aware that some of your audience might not have read your book. So you don't know when to stop saying. You just want to say enough to make it sound interesting, that they'll want to pick it up, but you can't really give too much away. So I can talk a little bit about what The Prisoner's about, but not very much.
Okay, well, tell us what you can tell.
Okay, so it tells the story of Emily, who's a young girl. She's newly married, and one night she's kidnapped along with her husband, Ned. And she ends up in a darkened room with captors that don't speak to her. And basically, the novel is about how she got there, why she's in that position, and how she's going to get out of it.
And it is thrilling, and it is riveting, and it is unique. And it's about, and I think we can talk about this, it's about thematically power and money and empowerment and sort of greed, but mostly power and friendship. Talk about those themes. Where did this idea emerge?
I think, Emily came to me fully formed. I just saw this girl in a darkened room and I wondered why she was there and what she was doing. And obviously somebody had power over her, but I was very determined that Emily would get that power back and that she'd be able to turn the tables. And, I just built up the story around her. And yes, it's very much about friendship because it's so important. I mean, best friends, good friends. And if something happens to those friends, it can be terrible. And it really defines Emily and who she is. And I just wanted to, like all my heroines, my characters, I really like them to actually win in the end if they can. I'm not going to tell you whether Emily does or not because that'll be giving too much away. But it definitely is about a power struggle between her and her husband. And yes. So without giving,
and she is underestimated. Her prowess and her savvy is underestimated. Sometimes also by herself.
Yes, definitely.
I mean, she struggles and she perseveres and she's determined and she has a really good heart. We love her. We love Emily, but underestimated. Talk a little bit about that as a concept. How people deal with each other.
Yeah, I think, Emily's very young. She's about 21 years old. And she she's had quite a hard life. So she does underestimate herself. She relies very much on her friends to bolster her and everything. But, it is about finding herself and realizing just how much she is capable of. Mm-hmm. And by the end of the novel, we see how much she's actually, the growth of her character during it and how much she has evolved. And for me, that's a very important theme. In a lot of my books, for example, in Behind Closed Doors, Grace definitely doesn't have any power at all. And she really has to fight to get out of the situation she's in. And I quite like that theme in my novels.
I've noticed that throughout. And it's wonderful because that allows you to write a chilling, thrilling, propulsive plot where there's an arc of the plot. But it also allows you really to have an arc of the character. Mm-hmm. So when the plot may be over, but the character is in a different place. Is that how it feels to you?
Yes, I mean there has to be the story has to move, the character has to move along. There has to be some kind of growth, And what I love is this power struggle between her and her husband because he has so much of it at the beginning, and then gradually she becomes the stronger character because they're kidnapped and she deals with it so much better than he does.
Yes, indeed. And you were talking about The Prisoner by B.A. Paris, which is absolutely not to be missed. It is launching today here in the U.S. And at the beginning of the book, Amelie is really as low as on the totem pole as she can possibly be. She is really actually on the streets. And depending on the kindness of strangers. And the man who turns out to be her husband eventually, Ned, has more than anybody could ever imagine having of money and power and influence. Talk about the clash of those two cultures, the have and the have-nots, and wanting something.
Yes, Emily's come from a very poor background. She's grown up with her father, who was an alcoholic. And she's never had very much. So, of course, when she first meets Ned and is introduced to his world, she can't believe it. And, is that, as you said at the beginning, or I think it was in book list, the review talked about a Cinderella character, which actually hadn't occurred to me before. But that is very much what Emily is. She's come from this very poor background. She's never had very much. And she goes to London, and suddenly through her friend, first of all, she's introduced to a world where people go to parties, glamorous parties, and she thinks this is amazing, which is why, she does agree to marry Ned, because she wants a taste of that. Sorry, that was...
It's your fans. It's Hollywood calling. It's your agent calling.
Sorry
No,
about that.
it's somebody calling. It's someone calling to say, what time is Crime Time on? I want to watch that right now. And it's on right now. I've had people call me during the show, and I think, oh golly, but it's life, right? It's life. And meanwhile, Shannon Hansen is saying, I'm hooked on this. Janine is saying, can't wait to read The Prisoner. One of the things, though, about that, when I saw the book list review that called it a Cinderella story, that had never crossed my mind either, that explanation of it. And I think because it may be in one element of it, but certainly not in any other elements of it. It is sort of a rags to riches, briefly story. But certainly the Handsome Prince is not who you would think it would be. And I have to tell you all, I will tell you, BA, that when I've read many psychological thrillers, as you have. And I can generally figure out pretty much what the book is going to be and how it's going to turn out. So early on in this book, I thought, I got this. I totally know what this is. She's such a terrific writer, but I totally get this. And then the next page, I thought, oh no, I was wrong. And then I was super wrong. And then I was wrong. And then finally I was just infinitely, brilliantly wrong. So it is just superly, you all, when I look over here, I'm looking at the comments. Don't even try to figure it out. Just immerse yourself in the story of this book, because you are too good, BA. How much do you think about that? Fooling, the deception and the manipulation and the sleight of hand that an author has to have.
I think about it a lot, because I really want my readers to be surprised, because so many people can guess things. As you say, when you read the book, you can guess quite early on how it's going to pan out. And I really try to give my readers a surprise. But I must admit that the plot for The Prisoner was quite complicated. It took me quite a long time, because when I write, I don't really have a plan. I don't really plan out my books beforehand. And it was brilliant because there's quite a big twist in the middle of the book. And that just came about just as I was getting there. And I hadn't really thought about how the rest of the book was going to go, the second half of the book. But as soon as that idea came to me, I thought, well, actually, this is brilliant. I can flip it and I can do this. And yes, I really do want to give my readers a surprise. They're very much in my mind when I'm writing, because I think I owe it to them. So it's not really fooling them. It's just giving them what I hope is a really interesting read.
Well, people talk about it as sleight of hand, that you're leading the readers down one path, all very nicely, and we think we know what's going to happen, and we're looking in one direction, and we have one idea, and then you just flip it, you pull the rug out from under us, and say, oops, you should have been looking over here, because this is where the action has really happened. I'm fascinated that you say that you don't plan, because earlier in the interview you were talking about that this image of the girl in the darkened room had come to you, and you were figuring out, you had to figure out why she was there and what happened and whether she gets out or not. So do you just sit at the computer and type chapter 1, or how does that work?
Yes. Yeah. I just, I think about how my book's going to start. So I had Emily, I had this girl, and I thought a lot about her. I realized she was quite young. I thought, yeah, she's going to be newly married. And then I thought, well, actually, she seems, although she's afraid here, she's not as afraid as she could be. And I wondered why she wasn't. And then, so I thought, so maybe she feels slightly safer there for some reason. Maybe she feels a bit more protected there, which is strange because she's a prisoner. And I built up the story around that. But yes, I don't really know what's going to happen in chapter 2, 3, 4. I really am very character-led when I write. I couldn't plan out a whole book because I don't know, it would just change as I was writing it. So as
Oh,
I say, the plot twist in the middle, I had no idea that was going to come about.
and that's one of the wonderful things about I just dropped my pencil. B.A. Paris's books. We're talking about her brand new The Prisoner today, which is just out today from St. Martin's in the U.S. I mean, that's one of the amazing things about writing, and I do it the same way. Is just I sit down at the computer and I think I can't wait to find out what happens, and
Yes.
I have to write it to find out what happens. But I have had my editors say to me, "Can you just send me an outline?" And I say, no, because apropos of what you're saying, and Patty's saying, I love a good surprise. Apropos of what you're saying, I don't know what happens until it happens. I can't make it happen.
Exactly.
So do you love it when you get surprised along the way with your twists?
Oh gosh, yes, I surprise myself. I really do. I don't think I'm capable of doing that or thinking up that twist, and then it comes and I just think, well, this is great. And yes, I surprise myself all the time. And it's just that eureka moment when you think, crumbs, I can do this, and that's going to be really exciting. And the reader's going to get a good surprise because they're not going to have thought of that at all because I didn't think of it. So how can they?
Exactly. And I love that in all of your books, the twists happen throughout. It's not a twist ending. It's twists and surprises. Yeah. It's twists and surprises throughout the book. You were saying when you thought of one of the things that I know is one of the things that surprised me too, that you thought, oh, this is brilliant. This will work. Sue Grafton used to call that the magic, that there's a way that a writer brain works. That's very difficult to untangle and very difficult to describe, because what is it that happens where you have no idea, and then you have an idea? Do you know that feeling?
Definitely. I mean, sometimes, that will happen quite often. I'll be at a point in my novel where I don't really know. I'm not sure what's going to happen next. I just go for a long walk, think about it. And honestly, by the time I've come back from the walk, there's usually a solution's been found because, I just get away from the computer and think about it. But yeah, these are magical moments, especially when you find an idea like the middle of my book that I hadn't thought about. And I just thought, well, actually, that takes my book into a whole different direction, because I hadn't thought of where the second part of the book would go yet. And I was probably feeling a bit worried and thinking, I'm halfway through the book, what's going to happen next? So yeah, I love that idea that we have these magic moments. And thank goodness.
It's very reassuring to hear you say that you're worried in the middle of the book. I always call that the muddle in the middle, when you think, oh my golly, I just don't know. And then just as you say, some domino falls. And it makes the rest of the story fall in a surprising and different direction. We don't want to give away anything, but it won't give away anything to say that at the beginning of the book, Emily is in a pitch dark room and no one is talking to her, and she doesn't know why she's there. And it's very realistic, or feels very realistic, about how she learns to cope with the darkness. Did you try that? How did you think about steps? And you tell it. How did you practice being in a dark room to get all the sensory input, or lack of, that would take?
I didn't practice being in a dark room. I did kind of pace just to see how big the room would be, but I just imagined it. I've got quite a vivid imagination, so I just sat down and imagined what it would be like and how I would find my way around the room and what I would do. I just thought about what I would do if I suddenly found myself in a dark room. Well, first of all, I try and find a light switch, and I try and figure out how big the room was, and then is there anything on the floor that's going to trip me up? Are there going to be any nasty surprises? Just trying to basically. And I just used that. I just thought, how would I act if I was in a darkened room? Hopefully I never will be. It'd be horrific. But yes, so that's what...
In those circumstances, at least. And so those circumstances, at least. But the other things, for instance, that are superly thoughtful, for instance, is when it is pitch dark and someone gives you something and you don't know what it is. Like in a haunted house, spaghetti feels really pretty terrible if you don't know what it is. And so she's hesitant even to touch anything because she can't gauge. Talk a little bit about that and whether that was fun to figure out.
Yes, it was. I mean, I had to imagine if I was given a bowl of something or a plate of something, how would I find out what it was? You know, so yes, I would taste it, but I wouldn't take a big mouthful just in case it was something horrible. So, you know, you would just have to taste your way through it. And, you know, and you would wonder if it was poisoned or if the water was actually water. You wouldn't know what you were drinking. So, yeah, I just, you know, really imagined what it would be like if I was in that situation and how I would go about it. And maybe if somebody else had written about a girl being in a darkened room, it would be completely different because they would imagine it a different way.
And it becomes so primal at some point, the need for safety and for shelter, and her relationship with a blanket even is very touching. Did those scenes turn out to be more emotional for you than you imagined at first?
Yes, I think so. I mean, yes, definitely. You know, the blanket, the part of the blanket where she clings to that blanket that I don't know whether I want to give it away, but she's been brought, you know, and that's a huge turning point for her when she thinks, well, actually, if I really, really need something, would they bring it to me? You know, and yes, and that becomes, yes, she takes it everywhere with her afterwards because it means such a lot to her.
Yeah, which is such a touching detail and so incredibly realistic. And also that one of the things that you do so gorgeously in The Prisoner, which if you have just joined us, hi Renee, hi Sherry, and Patty, thank you for being here. If you have just joined us here today, we're talking about The Prisoner, the brand new book by B.A. Paris. One of the things that you always do so seamlessly in your book is books is the idea of the unknown peril, the unknown that's scarier than what it is known, the smells and sights and sounds that you have to suss out what they are and whether they're true. Was that interesting to write?
Yes, I really enjoyed writing this book, actually. I really loved it. It was the hardest book I've written because of the plot, but I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed this idea, well, not the idea of her being a prisoner, but trying to work out what she would do. And, you know, yes, and when all the sensory things are taken away from you, really, you know, when you can't see anything. But I did get that round a little bit, you know, because she does have
No, you're not great. I promised BA that I would stop her because it wouldn't be a problem if you told that. But
no.
One of the joys of reading your books is really having the journey with the character. This is such a riveting journey. I can't begin to tell you how late I stayed up for several nights reading this book because I just I could not put it down. You seem like such a nice person, BA, and I know you have a wonderful family, and you're in your daughter's flat right now, but you have this undercurrent of real darkness in all of your books. The idea, how well do you really know your spouse? How well do you really know your friends? What dark deeds are people capable of doing? And yes, it's all fictional, but you have to come up with that. Have you always liked that kind of book? What in your brain makes that happen? And what's your goal with that? It's not violence. It's just completely, it's the opposite of violence. It's just suspense.
I think, yes, I never knew that I could write novels like this. I never thought I would write thrillers and these dark books that I write. And my daughters are very surprised, you know, when they read behind closed doors, they said, you know, Mummy, where do you come up with these things? But I think because, you know, I do think you can't trust everybody. I do think, you know, behind closed doors or whatever, or friends cannot always be trusted. And I've had some experience with friends where they do stab you in the back. So I quite like exploring these themes that you can't really trust anybody. And, you know, I never intended to write psychological thrillers. When I first started writing about 12 years ago, my first books were always just domestic books, I would say, you know, and they had no murder, no psychological bullying in it or anything like that. And it was when I wrote Behind Closed Doors that everybody said, oh, this is a great psychological thriller. And I thought, wow, and my publisher wanted another psychological thriller. And I thought, well, I had no intention of writing this. So I had to find something in me to bring out these dark ideas. And now, I often, if I'm walking somewhere, I'll suddenly say, oh, that would be a good place for a murder. Or, so my mind is very switched on now to looking for darkness in things. So, but it is quite surprising. I'd never have thought I'd write this type of book, never.
Your mind is switched on to searching for darkness in things is so intriguing and so perfect for a writer, much better for a writer to act on that than it is for anybody else to act on that. I mean, Behind Closed Doors, if you haven't read Behind Closed Doors, I know you have, you have, but if you haven't, you should read that. It was quite a groundbreaking, must have been life-changing book for you. What was it like when that came out?
Oh gosh, it was absolutely incredible because I had no idea of the impact it would have. Really, honestly, a publisher picked it up, but they didn't make a big thing of it. For them, it was just another book. And what really helped was the bloggers got behind it. They just loved it. I think it was a little bit different to anything that had come out. Mm-hmm. And I could not believe what happened, but I actually didn't understand what happened because I was living in France. I wasn't even on Twitter at the time, I don't think. I had no idea about sales figures. I had no idea about anything. So when my publisher was writing, or my editor was saying, Bernadette, you've now sold 500,000 copies of it. I never knew that was actually something, to do that in 5 months was actually something, no, actually 4 months was amazing, until I went over and they gave me a champagne celebration. And I remember turning to my editor and saying, well, is 500,000 copies good? And she said to me, yes. But I didn't. And I think it was quite good that I didn't realize the impact it was having. And I didn't realize, sometimes I wish I had known, because I would have loved to have lived that, but I didn't really understand. I didn't really understand that it had broken all these barriers and it was a huge success. It took me a while.
That's very sweet, BA. But I think you have lived it. You have lived the joy of it. Let me go back to, and that's how I fell in love with you, was with that book, because that was just gaspingly great. And you have never let us down since then, including with the fabulous The Prisoner that is out right now. I have a couple more questions and then we'll take audience questions. So make sure, Mighty Blazes, Margaret in the back room is saying, is it 500 copies sold? Good, BA asked innocently. Yes, indeed. More than most people sell in their lifetime. I can tell you that. You have some marvelous settings in this book, some gorgeous houses. Talk a little bit about writing those, and are those completely fictional?
Yes, they are, the houses, definitely so. I'm just trying to think of the one that was in, that one. Yes, that was fictional. Sometimes it's based a little bit on houses I've lived in, not that they're grand or anything, but the layout of the rooms. Mm-hmm. I remember for Behind Closed Doors using the house we lived in France as a kind of guide, because you have to imagine a house when you have a character walking through it. So but just a little anecdote which made me laugh, because the breakdown is set in a little cottage, very much like the one I live in, which I wrote before I lived in the cottage, but it's just been made into a film. It's just gone into production, and it's no longer a cottage. It's just this huge mansion, and it's lovely. And I had the pleasure of going to visit it, so to see this wonderful house, which isn't in my book, but I do like the idea of these big houses. So it was fine. But yes,
you do them marvelously. So are you saying that in the film version they made it not be a cottage, but they made it be a big house?
Yes, if you ever go and see it, you'll see it. It's absolutely amazing. It's a beautiful house, but it's nothing like I imagined or described in my book.
Is the movie finished?
Well, the filming's finished, and hopefully it will, be on the screen maybe next year, I hope.
Have you seen any of it?
Sorry?
Have you seen any of it?
Yes, I went along twice to the filming, which was lovely. And to see, it's absolutely amazing seeing something that I've never thought I've done anything great, but actually hearing actors speak the lines that you wrote and see the scene come to life, a scene that you imagined, is quite amazing. And I even have a little cameo role in it.
Oh, tell me, what are you?
Just sitting in the background in a cafe, but you might be able to spot me.
That's great. That's great. Well, you'll come back to Crime Time when the movie comes out. We can have a movie watching party. That will be marvelous. Did you always want to be a writer?
Sorry?
Did you always want to be a writer? Was this something that was in the back of your mind at all?
Yes, I think so. I think from a very early age, I wanted to write, but I never thought I'd write novels. My idea was to write children's stories because I used to make them up for my daughters. And even before I had children, I used to jot down little children's stories. And I always felt that I would write stories for children. And it was one of my daughters that pushed me to writing a novel. But
How did
I
that
never
happen?
done it. So I have her to thank for that.
How did that happen?
Well, she knew I wanted to write. We were talking about children's stories, and she said, "Oh, I want to write a novel." She had an idea for a novel, and she wanted me to write it for her. And of course, I said no. And then I saw a competition for a novel in one of the Sunday newspapers in the UK. So I said to her, "Well, you should enter this. Write the novel." And she looked up the guidelines and she said, "Well, I can't because I'm only 16 and you have to be 18. But she said, "Why don't you write a novel?" And I said, "Oh, no, I could never write 80,000 words." And she said, "I'm sure you could. Why don't you try?" And that night I went to bed and I thought of a story about a family. And a few days later, I bought a computer and started writing. And I just started writing and I couldn't stop. But it wasn't behind closed doors. This was one of my very first books that will never get published. But it just gave me the bug. I became obsessed and couldn't stop writing for 6 months.
What made you think that, I don't mean to be impudent about this, but what made you think you could write a book? Takes a lot of either confidence or naivete or spirit or inspiration.
I think perhaps the fact that my daughter thought I could do it gave me the confidence to do it, maybe. And once I had this idea of the family, I knew, in fact, that book became 4 books because it was a whole saga of a family. And it became 4 or 5 books, which will never be published because basically nobody would want to read books like that because it's really, it's not a psychological thriller or anything like that. But I just couldn't stop writing. I literally couldn't stop writing. And I wrote these 5 books in the space of about 2 years and then wrote other ones and tried to get those published and it didn't work. But I think it was my daughter. I think it was that thing of not letting my daughter down because she said, "Of course you can do it, Mummy." So I thought, well,
that is a wonderful story. Do you think that you learned how to be as good of a writer as you are in The Prisoner and all of your previous books that were published from that experience of just trying?
Yes, I think just trying and just this, I got so many rejections because, I was sending out books that weren't marketable probably. But what was lovely was that a couple of agents that I sent to said to me, "Don't give up because you can write." And that was amazing because I don't know, probably I'm quite determined. So I probably would have gone on trying and trying, but just to have that voice in your head that tells you you are a writer, you can write is huge. It's huge. If somebody's got confidence in you, and that really made me determined. And when I was getting all the rejections, I would just think, I'm going to do it one day. I am going to do it. I'm determined to do this. I'm going to write a book and get it published. I still couldn't believe it when it actually happened.
Still, that is a lovely story. That just brings tears to my eyes. The idea of you being so devoted, so compelled to do it, and your darling daughters who are encouraging you. What do they say now that you're a complete superstar?
They don't think I'm a complete superstar. No, I'm just their mum, really. I'm just their mum. And of course, they're proud of me. And I think especially they forget, but then they'll go into a bookshop and they'll see a picture. And one of my daughters, actually, the one who splat I'm in, she said to me, "Do you know, Mummy, it's lovely because I can go to so many countries in the world and go into a bookshop and open up the book and there's a photo of you." And I thought that was so lovely. She said, "I just need to find one of your books and there's a photo of you in there." So I think they are. Of course, they're proud. They're lovely. They're very supportive. But they do joke, say, so I don't get a big head or anything like that.
And that's lovely to have. To have the international connection with your daughters. That all they have to do is go into a bookstore and open the book, and there's Mom watching them. Yeah. And that is quite lovely. That is a perfect time for us to segue into our audience questions. I know they're pouring in, so let's see whether we have any questions for you today. Everyone's talking about your origin story and how marvelous that is. And Donna says, "I'm so glad you didn't stop at writing for children." Has that just completely gone away?
I think so. Yes, I prefer writing novels now, I must admit.
And we are happy that you do. The question just popped up and went away. Does the cover hold any secrets for the book?
Actually, that's a very good question. And it does, because it's the prisoner, and yet this scene is taken from somewhere in the book where she's staying in this beautiful house and there's a pool that she actually has access to. So she could go to the pool. She's not a prisoner in this house, but the gate shows that there is a problem. So I really like this because it's very clever, I think.
And also that the book is so much about dark and light, actual physical darkness and lightness, and then the darkness and lightness of how we all are to each other, the darkness and lightness of human beings to each other and individuals. So it is a great cover. And I love the colors. It's marvelous. Sherry's saying, if you could choose to be one of your characters in any of your books, who would you choose? Oh, wow, Sherry, that's hard.
Gosh, that's really difficult because they're always in really terrible trouble.
Yeah.
I don't really want to be any of them. I wouldn't like to live their lives. But let me just have a quick think about that. I'm just running my head down the characters. I really like Emily. I'd like to have been like her when I was 20 years old.
Yes.
I was very naive. I had, a bit like Emily, actually, not much life experience. So the journey that she makes in that short space of time, even though she goes through horrific things, I would, probably Emily.
You've got to admire her spunk and determination, which is exactly what you had, isn't it, in writing your books?
So
you are like Emily. You are like Emily.
To have that self-belief, and that's what Emily has to learn in the book. She has to believe in herself, and she has to have that determination to get to the truth and to get out of the situation she's in. So yes, definitely.
And she's a very loving person as well. When she has a friend that she's devoted to,
yes.
She honestly cares, and she's very thoughtful of people. I love how you weave that through, that we know what her heart is throughout. Janine is asking the second hardest question that you could ever ask an author, which is, what do you read for pleasure?
Oh gosh, I don't have much time to read for pleasure. And funnily enough, it probably wouldn't be psychological thrillers. I do, I read a lot of psychological thrillers, mainly for work. And of course, there are some that I would read for pleasure as well, like yours, Hank. I love your book. But probably if I could just read for pleasure, I love these big sagas, that about this thick and span generations, and Wilbur Smith and people like that, So I think if I was reading for pleasure, it would be more like that, but I don't have time to read those sort of books at the moment.
Is that what your initial unpublished book sort of was, a big family saga?
Yes, it was actually. It was, and that's probably why I wrote this kind of 4-volume thing about a family, which actually my daughters read and loved it at the time. So, I don't really think there's a market for that sort of book now. It's still very much, and we're so lucky, psychological thrillers and crime.
Yes, we're both crossing fingers about that.
Yes.
That the desire for those does not go away. Yes. Renee is asking, are you currently writing another book, or have you finished another one already? And can you tell us anything about it?
So I have written another book. I've done the first draft, and luckily my UK editor, my US editor both love it. So that's great, because I wrote it blind, without them seeing it or knowing what it was about. And it's a calmer book in a way than, it's still a psychological thriller, but it's a calmer book than The Prisoner. It's not so, the plot isn't as complicated, but I really like my characters in it. It's a couple who are going through a crisis in their marriage because something has happened to him. He's had an experience that he finds it very hard to talk about. And I'm not going to tell you why he finds it hard to talk about, but you'll discover it in the book. And then a friend comes to stay. So yes, Hank, we were talking about your next book called The House Guest, because I was going to call my next book The House Guest. And then you wrote to me and said your next book was called The House Guest, so I've had to change my title now. But yes, again, a friend comes to stay and kind of overstays her welcome, and that's all I can really say about it. But
what are the odds of that, BA, that we would come up with the same title? And thank you very much. I would have been trampled by a BA Paris book, The House Guest. So thank you for your graciousness about that. It's really very touching. Who else has a question? And I know we both had characters named Ned, and that was funny too. Sherry is asking, how long did it take you to write this book?
The Prisoner, because of the complicated plot, and I didn't change it, but I wanted to write it in the past tense at first, and it didn't really work. And I wanted to try writing it in the third person, and that didn't work either. And then I wrote Amelie's past in the present tense. And then my editor said, actually, I think that would be better in the past. And so I did a lot of changing of tenses and writing in the first person or third person. So of course, if you start off in the third person and then you have to change to the first person, it's not as easy as ever. It's completely, you can't just, change the verb ending. There's a whole different way of speaking. So I spent more time on this book than I have on any other book. And probably it took me about 9 months, but normally I finish a book in about 5 months.
Do you write every day and a certain amount of words every day?
No, I'm not one of these, I write when I can. I mean, I love it if I get a whole day or 2 days in a row where I can just write without being distracted, having to go anywhere. I love that. But, I have a life that's quite busy. So it's quite rare that I can sit down. I couldn't sit down for a week and write, unless I went away somewhere. But I don't really have a routine. I can write anywhere. I don't have a particular place that I have to write in. As long as I have my computer and my need to put it on, I'm fine.
That's great. I can envision that. I can envision that. And let me tell you all, as we close this afternoon, and we'll draw for, Janine says, the Mighty Blaze has been such a wonderful way to spend Tuesday afternoons. I get excited when there's an author I haven't heard yet. Thank you. Oh my golly, Janine. B.A. Paris is The Prisoner out today. Absolutely, absolutely not to be missed. Thank you so much for being here. Let me close by saying, and we're going to do the giveaway in a second. So if you want to be entered in the giveaway, make sure you leave a question or a comment, or you will not be entered. The Wheel of Fun is going to spin in about 30 seconds, and we will see who wins. So in that 30 seconds, please put in your questions or comments. And you, BA, have referred to the book as complicated. And I have to say, I thought it was complex and twisty, but so easy to read, so much fun to read. It is not confusing in any way. It is not darkly complicated in any way. It's completely understandable. And I think I read the last, Darlene says this needs to be on everyone's TBR. Absolutely. I think I read the last, 3 chapters or so, just with my jaw hanging open, of how many plates you had spinning at the same time, and how logical it was, and how I never saw it coming. And as I keep saying to you all, just read it, just read it, just read The Prisoner, and then email B.A. Paris and tell her, or find her on Instagram or Facebook. Not Instagram anymore, Facebook. You have a special Facebook page. Tell us about that.
Or Twitter. And Twitter.
Okay.
I don't think in the US you use Twitter very much, do you? I'm very much a Twitter person. Oh. I love it because you can just leave little comments and everything. But I do have a website opening up very soon, so I hope people will subscribe to my newsletter, and they'll get lots of news about what I'm doing and about my next book. So I am approachable. People can reach me.
And if they want to find out about your website and about your newsletter, is it just baparis.com?
Yes, it is, exactly, baparis.com.
Great. And we will all find you there, because we cannot wait to find out about your new book. But today is to celebrate the brand new, glorious entrance of The Prisoner out from B.A. Paris from St. Martin's today in the US and Thursday in the UK. Let us spin the Wheel of Fun to see who will win a copy of The Prisoner. Look at everybody. It's so nice this is when I get to see everybody who came to join us this afternoon, and that is always marvelous to see. And we can't win. I already have this book, and I know Margaret wants one as well. We'll get you one, Margaret, but let's see who wins from the audience. It proves, though, that it's random, right? It proves this has never happened. Okay. It proves it's random, though, that we are spinning and we are winning ourselves, and that is not going to happen. So the winner is Janine Woodworth. That is marvelous. And didn't you say, Janine, that you hadn't read a B.A. Paris novel? And we are happy to make that happen for you. A wonderful copy. This is the advanced reader copy, but you'll get an actual gorgeous hardcover copy of The Prisoner. Before we go, and before I say goodbye to you, B.A., let me remind you that next Tuesday at 4 p.m. ET, we will have another fabulous discussion with a wonderful author. This is a book, The Cloisters by Katie Hayes, and I am starting to read this today, so I have no idea about it, but the back says, The Secret History meets Ninth House. And doesn't that tell you exactly what this is going to be? A scary academic mystery, maybe? The Cloisters by Katie Hayes. And on the front is a blurb by Sarah Penner, who we absolutely love. A sultry and sinister debut, jaw-dropping, says Sarah Penner. Gotta believe Sarah Penner. Next week, The Cloisters by Katie Hayes. And today we have been talking about The Prisoner with the marvelous B.A. Paris. B.A., thank you for being here today. Thank you for staying up. I know it's completely dark in London, but we have so enjoyed, all of us, having you be here today.
Thank you so much for inviting me again and for the lovely interview as well. Thank you very much, Hank.
My complete pleasure. Happy Pub Day. Happy everything. Love to you all and your family. And to you, all of you who joined us today on Crime Time on A Mighty Blaze. Thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next Tuesday.